Nash Alta. Bored now, Tits said, grabbing Nick. Let's go. A whirlwind of darkness and light enveloped Nick and Tits. The maelstrom unleashed a volley of heat which burned my face, but it quickly collapsed in on itself with a cork-like pop. Yulk and I stared, stunned, at where they had just been standing. Mumoldabran and Algebran let out a synchronous sigh. Well, I guess that settles the debate, Mumoldabran said. Where did they go? I demanded. Probably close to the enemy encampment, but far enough away to escape notice, Algebran replied. I understand your fears, Nash, but rest assured, Tits will not allow Nick to perish. Whether or not Tits allows his death is not our concern, Yulk interjected, a measure of anger seeping into his voice. Our concern is whether or not Tits can prevent his death. He's got you there, Algebran, Mumoldabran chuckled. Tits will do everything in their power to prevent Nick's demise or injury, Algebran said calmly. Even if their power ultimately fails, we have other measures that can be taken. Mumoldabran's uncharacteristically jolly face fell into an expression more suited to it. Do not make promises that you cannot keep, Algebran, the king of Archfey warned. I am fully willing to explore these measures if the need arises, Algebran said. The higher ones obviously have a vested interest here, and the court doesn't hold me in Enough! Mumoldabran's shout echoed through the trees surrounding us. It stood and marched over to Algebran until they were face to face. The two stared angrily at each other. What are these measures? I asked once my ears stopped ringing. Not for you to know, Mumoldabran said coldly. It is a secret that you must hope with all your might to never uncover. What? Wait, so if it's used on Nick, he'll uncover the secret? What? No. Mumoldabran turned to me with a confused stare. Mortals aren't capable of observing their surroundings when they're dead. To him, he'll die and then wake up, if it's allowed. It will be allowed, Algebran said with a serious tone. So you say, lesser one, Mumoldabran scoffed and retook its seat. I have my doubts, and they are far more reasonable than your certainty. Oh, whatever. No use poking at theoretical wounds. Orcs, what are your plans? Plans? I asked. We haven't had a chance to make any, Yulk said with a dour chuckle. Fair enough. Algebran can take you to wherever you want to go and have Nick meet up with you later. Or you can aid us in our fight and we will reward you. Well, that's an easy decision, I replied. Obviously What reward are you offering? Yulk interrupted. I turned to him, stunned at his sudden callousness. He held up a hand to reassure me, and then I remembered who we were dealing with. A reward to one can be a punishment to another, and the fair folk are strange ones. Oh, good catch, Mumoldabran laughed. If you had left the reward up to me, I don't know if I would have been able to resist the bag of bugs prank. What would you consider a reasonable reward to be? The aid of the fair folk who reside within the deep wild forest in helping Nick return to his home seems reasonable, Yulk said, turning to me. I nodded my assent. Our goal is to return him from whence he came as if he hadn't left at all, by the way. Yulk grinned as he turned back to Mumoldabran. Can't have you giving us a way to get him back a few decades after he left or some other such twist of fate. Ah, well, I don't know if we'll actually be able to help, but I can assure you that we can certainly try. Mumoldabran nodded. The higher ones are offering the same reward to Nick for his compliance with their various suggestions, Algebran added. Then they've likely arranged for this discussion as well, Mumoldabran sighed. Very well, I agree. If you aid us in this fight, we will do everything within our power to help Nick return to his point of origin? Home? Wherever the hells he was before he came here. Then it's settled, Yulk said. Do we need to shake hands or sign something? Nope. Just go along with Algebran and get equipped. I leave them to you. Mumoldabran nodded at Algebran. Understood, Algebran replied, moving between Yulk and I, placing a hand on each of our shoulders. Prepare yourselves. By the time I had registered what Algebran was going to do, and long before I could have prepared myself, darkness settled over my vision, and I once again felt an inexplicable pull. The feeling of Algebran's hand faded for a moment and then returned, but the darkness remained. It took a moment to realize that I was clenching my eyelids. With a deep, calming breath, I opened my eyes and took a look around. Interesting, Yulk said. That wasn't as bad on an empty stomach. Yeah, poor Nick, I chuckled. We had appeared in a clearing that was filled with fae, fairies, and every other variation of the fair folk that I could imagine. There were some that were familiar to me, like the bone and blood fae, and others whose natures I couldn't even begin to guess at. In the center of the clearing were several large trees that were rapidly sprouting massive bluish-green fruits. One such fruit finished its growth and dropped to the ground, where waiting fairies began carving it into slices with remarkable expertise. The slices were further carved into a transparent square and handed off to a set of bone fae who were attaching handles to them. My jaw dropped as I realized that these were the shields that Nick was talking about, and the Wilder had already made hundreds of them, maybe even thousands. Bushes surrounding the clearing were also rapidly growing their branches in an obvious spear shape. Wilder were harvesting these branches and passing them out. Algebron patted Yulk and I on the shoulder and cleared its throat. "Well, this is where we're equipping everyone," it said. "Get yourself a spear and shield, Nash." "I prefer my axe or swords," I explained. "I'm sure your skill with those weapons would serve you well in a one-on-one bout with a vampire or brood," Algebron smiled condescendingly. "However, this is a full-scale battle and you are at just as much risk as we are. It would be best if you join the shield line." "And I will be right behind you," Yulk said cheerily. "Blasting all the vampires that you managed to stick." Algebron nodded at Yulk's enthusiasm, and before I could protest, he gently guided us toward a line of Wilder. They were grabbing one spear and one shield each and moving on. They moved aside as we approached, and Algebron grabbed a shield and spear before turning back to me. "Here you go, Nash. Try these on for size," it said, handing them to me. I examined them, surprised at how light they were. What little experience I had with shields screamed at me that this one was far too light to be effective, and that it wouldn't even be able to halt a swiftly thrown rock. It must have shown on my face, though, because Algebron laughed. "I assure you it's quite sturdy. We've already replaced a decent portion of our front with them, and they're holding up nicely," it explained. "That being said, their lightness is an issue. You won't be able to rely on the heft of the shield to keep the enemy from pushing you back. Instead, we've found success with digging the shield into the ground where possible." "Makes sense," I nodded. "Okay, I guess I can work with these." "Excellent. All right, this way." We trailed after Algebron as it led us away from the Fey equivalent of an armory and toward another large group of Wilder. I took in some of the sights as we walked and almost immediately wished I hadn't. Under a copse were several Wilder that were in various states of dismemberment. Half a fairy fluttered around carrying leaves to a Fey with nothing but a jaw for a face. I realized that this must be their medical tent, and a shudder crawled up my spine when I noticed how quiet it was. There wasn't a single member of the fair folk beneath that group of trees that shouldn't be in extreme pain, but some of them were actually laughing. "Don't let it get to you," Algebron said, either reading my mind or expression. "Our physical forms are only a small part of our being, and we don't feel pain as you do. The injured and dead are the lucky ones in this case. Those that were captured are bound in iron, which is one of the few things on the mortal plane that can cause us to experience actual physical pain." "What are some other things?" Yulk asked. I looked at my brother with an unimpressed expression. Surely he didn't actually believe that Algebron would answer such a question. "Truth be told, the world's heart contains a great many things that are hazardous to us. Silver, gold, platinum, and copper are the few metals that won't harm us. Aside from iron, the other metals you know of will hurt us but not kill us," it explained. "Then there's the metals you don't know of, which are just as hazardous to you as they are to us. There's other things as well, but that's a conversation for another time." My shock at the explanation was short-lived, as we then had to follow the Archfey through a group of Wilder. It was difficult, but eventually Algebron came to a halt in front of a group of Bone Fey and we followed suit. "Greeting, King Horth. I trust you're enjoying the fight?" Algebron asked. "Indeed," Horth said. "You bring me orcs? For what purpose? A snack? An addition to my collection? Both, perhaps? You forgot us so quickly?" I asked with a laugh. "Forgot you? When have we—" "Oh, right, Basanoth's axe," Horth laughed. "Which makes you Nash. And that is Yulk. Yes, I recall. So not a snack, then?" "No, not a snack," Algebron said. "They're to join you in combat on this day. Guide them well and enjoy yourself, for this may be the last fight we face against this foe." "Truly? Shame. They're quite strong. Basanoth fell, by the way." "I know. They'll be back, though." "Yeah, sadly. The King of Blood Fey fell." "How?" Yulk asked. "How did the King of Blood Fey fall against a horde of vampire brood?" Horth laughed heartily. "How do you think? They swarmed over Basanoth like a buffet. It was hilarious. I'm never gonna let 'em live it down." Oh dear." "Right, well, I leave them in your care," Algebron said. I hope to see you again soon, Alta brothers. We said goodbye to Algebran, who surprisingly departed on foot instead of through some kind of trans-dimensional portal or whatever, and listened to Horth discuss strategy with some of the other Bone Fae. Thankfully, there wasn't much to discuss, and soon we formed up and began to march through the forest. I found myself at the front of the formation, with Yulk just behind me. We marched for a while in silence before I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Are you nervous?" Yulk asked. "A little." "You?" "Nope. I've got you with a big shield in front of me, and all I have to do is cast Fireball a few times," he chuckled. "Lucky you," I said sarcastically. The march continued until we cleared the trees. "Form the line." The Bone Fae next to me halted, and I followed suit. The rest of the Bone Fae in the rear of the formation came forward and stood next to us. With a hint of jealousy, I noted that their spears were way cooler than mine. I glanced back and saw that there were plenty of Fae and fairies accompanying Yulk, too. We wouldn't be wanting for firepower, that's for sure. March. We continued onward until we saw the first signs of battle. Smoke clung to the air, stinging my eyes and throat. A Fae standing on a fallen tree noticed us and shouted something, and a bunch of Wilder began to run in our direction. "Open ranks! Let 'em through!" The formation opened up, allowing the fleeing Wilder to pass by us without issue. Hot on their heels were a horde of vampire brood. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. "Close ranks!" Our formation closed just before the brood hit us. Remembering Algebran's advice, I dug my shield into the ground and pushed with all my might. I struggled for a moment, then remembered my spear. I pulled back, then thrust the spear forward, and feeling it hit home. Claws and teeth scraped and gnashed at my shield. The brood pinned against my shield by its comrades was as hideous as it was livid. It had no nose, ears, or eyelids, and its gnashing jaws contained sharpened teeth in a proper line like an elf's. The bones of its fingers and toes were exposed, with the ends of each tapering off into claws. The creature's muscles twitched out of sync with its movements. Piercing red eyes met my own with pure, unadulterated rage as it struggled to find a way through my shield. Fireballs flew over our shields, slamming into the brood and igniting them. Some of them fled, but others were impaled and couldn't escape so easily. The brood my spear had found screeched and jerked erratically as it tried to free itself from the flames. Once it stopped moving, I pulled the spear free. The remaining brood had backed up a ways and took a moment to gather themselves. Then, they attacked again, much to the same result. I stabbed but didn't feel anything, so I tried again and again until I got one. More fireballs flew, more brood ignited, and the brood gave ground once again. "Forward! Don't let them rest!" We lifted our shields from the ground and stepped over the still burning corpses of the brood to go after their comrades. The brood looked nervous, but before they could flee, they were pushed aside by drow. The drow began to charge at us, and it wasn't until they opened their mouths that I realized they were vampires. "Hold!" Our shields slammed into the ground again, and I prepared to thrust my spear home. Then the drow stopped moving and appeared stupefied. Seeing this, the brood panicked and ran in the opposite direction. "What? Already?" Yulk asked. Nick Smith. The darkness faded at the same time as the uncanny pulling sensation, and I found myself surrounded by trees. Again. Par for the course when dealing with the fair folk, I guess. At least they're the same kind, though. The familiarity of the trees and scenery helped a lot with my nausea, but a little bit of my breakfast made it back into my mouth regardless. The spicy kick distracted me from how gross it was, and I quickly spit it onto the ground. Tits chuckled as I spit and rubbed tears from my eyes. "That was a lot less than I was expecting," it said. "What, my breakfast?" I asked, wiping my face. "Yeah, I didn't throw up all the way." "I know, that's what I'm saying. I expected an unexpected pull like that to make you spew like a geyser. Kind of disappointed." "Well, I don't know what to tell you." I rolled my eyes. "I have a strong stomach." Tits rubbed its chin thoughtfully. "You know, there's a chance we might be able to teach you how to use the fair realm." "Wait, really?" "Maybe. Very maybe. It's not like mortal magic, and we would have to get a bunch of different agreements done." It thought for a moment. "Actually, forget I mentioned it. Probably shouldn't even have said that it could be possibly possible. Let's just pretend I didn't say anything, okay, sweetie?" Tits stepped toward me as if to ruffle my hair, but I instinctively took a step back. "What? Are you still mad at me? It was just a joke, Nick," it whined. "It was literally just a few minutes ago, and that kind of thing isn't a joke, Tits," I replied. I don't know. Disrespectful." "Disrespectful? How?" I I don't know, damn it. Not really. But you know I made a promise to Cass. When you play around like you do, you're pretty much saying that the promise I made is worthless. That my word is worthless! I crossed my arms angrily. And if my word is worthless, then I'm worthless. Ah, Tits said, leaning closer. But you're so fucking hot, though. My own inability to properly explain why I was angry combined with the Archfey's dismissive attitude caused rage to bubble up within me. I gave Tits the angriest glare my face could muster, but it laughed and backed away, raising its hands. Fine, fine. I will stop playing around long enough to fully understand the issue, it said. Maybe. We'll talk more about it later, though. You know, stuff to do next to sever. Or slice. Do you sever heads and slice necks, or does the verbiage even matter? Whatever, gimme your sword. I sighed and unsheathed my blade, offering it to Tits by the handle. The Archfey took the sword and sighed. This isn't going to smell good, it warned. Tits ran its finger along the blade of my sword. The flesh on its finger sizzled and released a pungent scent that smelled vaguely of what I imagine rotten almonds smell like. The acrid stench clouded the air, causing my stomach to turn in knots, as Tits did the same with the other side of the edge. Finally, it presented my sword back to me. What did you do? I asked, trying desperately not to heave. Sharpened it. Now it will slice clean through even the thickest of neck bones. That hurt, so you should say thanks, Tits grinned. Thank you. Your gratitude is appreciated. Now that your sword is decapitation ready, we need to get you into their encampment. I'll guide you. Tits stretched their arms into the air as if just waking up from a long nap. My confused expression was met with a grin that quickly began to distort as the Archfey's arms began to twist and contort in disgusting ways. The soft pink flesh began to pale and bubble, and black spots formed and extended themselves through the flesh. I was forced to look away as what was left of my breakfast began to mutiny once again. The sounds weren't any better, though. Loud squelching and popping echoed throughout the trees for several moments, and I tried desperately not to imagine what visuals the noises coincided with. Then blessed silence. I turned to take a peek, and was met with a crow staring back at me with what could almost be called a smug expression. Caw! It said with an unmistakably sarcastic tone. That was gross. I shuddered a little. So, how are you going to guide me? Can crows talk? A little, but telepathy would be better, Tits's voice said in my head. Shouting at you from the treetops would probably attract attention. Okay, lead the way then. Tits flapped its wings and launched into the air but didn't go far. I watched the Archfey turned crow perch on a branch and look around for a moment. This way, it said. Okay. How far is it? I asked. Not that far. You can make some noise if you need to practice your stealth. I'll let you know when you need to be quiet. How far is what? Ten asked. Ten's question caught me off guard, but I began to walk regardless. I thought about how to answer for a moment, and decided I should speak aloud to avoid Tits becoming confused as well. 10, you don't hear Tits? No. Is the Archfey speaking to you? Yeah, directly into my mind. Like you and the higher ones do. Interesting. Interesting was one way to put it. I wondered if Tits could hear 10, but decided against experimentation. I'm not even certain if Tits actually knows about 10 or not. Algebron does because of my memories, but whether or not Algebron told anyone is an entirely different story. As I made my way through the forest, stepping through foliage and over fallen logs, I felt a pang of guilt. 10 had been instrumental to my survival. It saved me from the crazy guy in the dungeon, from the Nahalim that had attacked us on the road, and even from the vampire that had nearly killed us all. I've trained and trained, but it never seems like it's enough. Maybe Nash and I have the wrong idea, and I should be focusing on magical studies instead. Too late for that now, though. Time for quiet, Tits said. A tree has fallen through the log wall ahead. They haven't repaired it yet, so you can get through. There are some of the dead-mind vampires patrolling, but they aren't exactly searching every nook and cranny. As long as you're not noisy, they probably won't notice you. Okay. I carefully crept through the vegetation until I found the fallen tree Tits had mentioned. Just as it had said, an absolutely massive log had toppled directly into the wall that the vampires had hastily erected. As quietly as I could, I climbed onto the log and crawled along it until I was over the wall. Then, I dropped down and waited to see if someone had heard me. You're fine to move. The Duke routinely visits the pens that are to your right. There are patrols, but you will be able to use some cages to avoid being seen. All right, I replied with a mental sigh. With my heart pumping faster than it ever has before, I quickly began to move in the direction Tits had indicated. I kept an eye out for any passing vampires, but all there seemed to be were tents and crates. I found the cages and crept up to them to wait for Tits to tell me where to go next. "You're not a vampire." I nearly jumped out of my skin, but quickly discovered the voice had come from a fairy that was locked within the nearest cage. I crept up to the cage as quietly as I could. "No, I'm not," I replied. "I'm here to kill a vampire." "You gonna help us?" the fae in the next cage over asked. "What's going on?" Tits asked. "The fair folk in the cages are asking questions," I explained. "Okay, be careful. There's brood nearby. I'll tell you if they start to move in your direction." "Well?" the fae asked. "You gonna help us or not?" I want to, but I don't know how I can," I said. "Could let us out," the fairy chuckled. "If I let you out, they'll figure out that I'm here. Then they'll kill me and put you right back into the cages. But once I kill the vampire duke, Muldebran, Algebran, and Tits will be able to hell—" "You could just kill us," the fae interrupted. "Yeah, that's true," the fairy agreed. "That sword looks pretty sharp." What? I asked, dumbfounded. "If you kill us, we'll be reborn," the fae explained. "We'll lose our memories and current identities, but honestly, that's not so bad. I'd rather not remember what hurt feels like. Fire hurts mortals, right?" Yeah, it does." "Oh, good. So you'll know what I mean when I say it feels like fire is flowing through my veins right now." A loud clang rang out. "Shut the fuck up!" a booming voice shouted. I peeked around the cages and saw several disfigured forms standing around. The only facial features they seemed to have were their wild eyes and toothy jaws. One of the brood was looking in our direction, prompting me to quickly take cover behind the cage. "Come make me, cockbiter!" the fae shouted back. I looked at the fae with alarm, but it simply winked back at me. "The fuck did you say to me?" "No! If you kills it, we will die," a different voice said sternly. "We do something else." "Food?" "Food," the first brood repeated. "Food is good. Let's go." I peeked out from behind the cage and watched them turn and walk away. With a sigh, I turned my attention back to the caged fair folk. The fae looked smug. "See? They aren't allowed to kill us, and they can't really help themselves when it comes down to it," the fae explained with a small, pained groan. "They don't want to be flayed alive by their masters, so they run away when provoked." "Now, you gonna kill us?" The fae and the fairy looked at me, waiting for my reply. Their pained expressions tugged at my heart, but I couldn't help but balk at the thought of killing innocent people. They'll be reborn, sure, but not as they are now. It really will be murder. A mercy killing, but still murder. Could I do such a thing, even to alleviate their suffering? "I'm sorry, I don't think I can," I said. "But you're here to kill the vampire duke, right?" the fairy asked. "Isn't it the same thing?" "Well, no. The duke is an enemy. Killing him is justifiable. You're not enemies, you're friends. Killing you isn't justifiable." "Friends? What do you mean, friends?" The fairy rubbed its eyes and looked closer at me. "Oh, I see. Well, shit. He can't kill us." "Why not?" the fae asked. "He's Nick, the human that just became a friend of the fair folk. Killing us could invalidate that friendship." "Oh, come on. If I was Muldebran, I'd forgive him." "Yeah, but you're not enough of a stamen to be Muldebran." "That's true. Well, fuck. Okay, Nick, I guess you can't kill us. Just do what you came to do quickly so we can be rescued or whatever. This shit hurts." "I will, I promise," I said. Then I reached out to Tits. "Am I all right to move?" "Yes." "Follow the path that the cages make and take the first right. Then go until you find some bushes. That will be the best spot for our ambush. You need to hurry, the Duke is on the move." I nodded to the fae and fairy, then moved as stealthily and quickly as I could in the direction that Tits had said. There were more fair folk, but they were much worse off than the other two and didn't feel like talking. My conscience was assaulted by guilt over the relief I felt for that. After pausing to let some more brood pass, I made the turn and found the bushes. I pushed their leaves aside and found a clear spot to hide in, then waited. The most difficult part was trying to control my breathing. Moving quickly and quietly was exhausting, but panting would give me away. I took some deep, controlled breaths to recover. "Here he comes, get ready." I peeked through the leaves and saw the vampire. He looked like a shriveled old man with pointy ears. Another pang of guilt hit me, but I wiped it away with the thought of what this thing was doing to the fair folk. The fact that he's old doesn't matter, especially when he's killing my friends. Plus, if given the chance, he'd kill me too. This isn't murder, it's war. The Duke drew closer and I involuntarily held my breath. My sword seemed to throb in my hand, and I readied myself to leap out and swing it with all my might. I knew I probably wouldn't need to swing that hard, but one minor mistake could spell failure and death. The Duke's slow stroll finally took him past me, and I leapt from the bushes with my sword ready. He turned to face me, completely devoid of expression, but I was already swinging. To my surprise, my sword swung clean through his neck with almost no resistance. The Duke's body and head crumpled to the ground separately, and blood began to spray from the wounds. Some of it splashed on my face, and I took a step back to avoid getting drenched. I wiped at the blood on my face and grimly examined my work. The gruesome scene burned itself into my mind, promising to visit me the next time I tried to rest. With a sigh, I raised my hand toward the Duke. "Labyrinth sack!"